This is not a civil war. It's not a war between different people in the country. It's specifically within the military institution. So it's closer to an attempted coup that failed and turned into a war between the state and rebel forces. America, if it's calling it a civil war, it means it wants it to be a civil war. But because they've spoken about it actually and they've attended meetings to split Sudan into 5 countries, and this specifically that's come up many times.
Is it possible to continue on this type of just continuous war, splitting countries and war? Is this possible even for United States to be able to control the region?
As long as they have clients, so long as they have agents, they can. This is a lot cheaper than going into Iraq and trying to split it into 3 countries while physically occupying it.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, and welcome to Islamic Oasis Live. Dear brothers and sisters, as we all are tuned in to what is taking place in Gaza, and the expansion of war could be extending to Lebanon, could be extended, who knows, that Iran could get involved in this whole situation, and Jordan, the whole area is in many ways at war. But while all of this is happening, our brothers and sisters in Sudan are facing a whole different calamity, which is a war between the Muslims, civil war. And thousands, almost, actually the whole country is now completely in chaos. Khartoum is burning. You could say maybe close to 25 million people have been affected. And the atrocities taking place are beyond belief. And it's actually unbelievable to kind of see, to see what is taking place, while you can say probably good 80%, 90% of the population is Muslim. And you have 2 generals that are going at it for the sake of purely power. Obviously, foreign interests are involved. United States is fully involved. Britain is fully involved. UAE is involved, and others, which we'll get into. And to discuss this very crucial topic and this situation in Sudan, we brought our brother Yusuf Hanif, who is, I have to mention it this way, who is half Sudanese. And we'll talk about why that matters and saying that he is full. Our brother is an activist, has spoken in many different places, speaks a lot on what's taking place in Sudan, is also an engineer. And so we brought him here to discuss war in Sudan. Brother Yusuf Hanif, welcome to Islamic Oasis.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. So, Brother Yusuf, it's been 8 months since the beginning of this war. And it doesn't seem to have, it's not reaching any conclusions. Rather, it's actually expanding. It's going deeper into Darfur. It's going into even, it seems like now because it seemed that the war was mostly confined to Khartoum. But the way it looks like is that both sides are trying to control certain part of the country. And would I be right to say that they may be trying to already split the country east and west, and each side that's fighting may get power in each side if this country does divide again east and west?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. There's a few things to comment on, even in your introduction. Barakallah feek. The way this conflict is portrayed, I think more so because of the way Antony Blinken talks about it, the Secretary of State in the USA, maybe skewing the reality for a lot of people who don't have access directly to other sources of information in Sudan. So, for example, he likes to use this phrase "civil war" a lot.
Yeah, I
And
understand.
even
Sure.
by that as well. But I would challenge that, and many other Sudanese activists will also challenge that and say this is not a civil war. America, if it's calling it a civil war, it means it wants it to be a civil war, but that's not the reality right now.
It's kind of thing they did
because
in
it's not.
Syria almost. Anytime there was a stand taken against the government, they basically turned the whole thing into a sectarian thing over there. But here, I see what you're saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's not a war between different people in the country. It's specifically within the military institution. So it's closer to an attempted coup that failed and turned into a war between the state and rebel forces. It's not really a civil war. Okay. The Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF, and the RSF, the Rapid Support Force. The Rapid Support Force, they're a paramilitary group, so they're connected loosely to the conventional army, the armed forces. They don't follow the same command structure. They just have a green light from the state. It's a legal entity, but they're irregular. They're irregular troops. They and the leader Hameti, they started on the 15th of April this year by attacking the Sudanese armed forces in Khartoum, the capital city, and the fighting spread from there immediately to surrounding cities. At the beginning of the war, because the Sudanese armed forces, they have a much stronger presence in Khartoum and in surrounding cities there, i.e., the center of the country. Khartoum is not the geographic center of the country; it's like the population center of the country, because there's desert, so it's not really exactly in the middle, but it's where most of the people live. And the Sudanese armed forces took control of most of these areas, defeated the RSF. The RSF, they mainly come from Darfur in the west. So the fighting extended. Khartoum and Darfur was mainly where most of the fighting was going on. And since then, the RSF have taken control of most of Darfur and a few cities on the way to Khartoum. And they have at least 2/3 on paper control of Khartoum, but in reality, it's probably more than that.
You're talking about
and now they've extended
rapid force. That's run by Muhammad Fateh. No, Hamid.
Muhammad Hamdan Dagalo. So his nickname is Himeti. So people call him by his nickname. It's not his actual name. So so Himeti's army, the RSF, this paramilitary group, the rebel forces, they control most of Darfur now, and most of Khartoum state, and they've started to attack other cities, far away from the original base of operations, which is Darfur. That's like the most summarized summary I can give you of the war. It's not a civil war. It's a war between two factions within the military institution. And right now it seems that the RSF have the upper hand on the ground at the moment. And the US is heavily involved. It wants it to be a civil war. When Blinken says civil war, he doesn't mean it actually is. He wants you to believe it is because he wants it to become a civil war.
It seems like they've now the RSF, they now are controlling. I heard even the oil rigs, Sheikh. I mean, this was not the case, it seems, because the way, at least when I was looking at the map, it looks like what one side has done, which is the RSF, has taken the oil fields and some. And the other side has more of the planes and the military equipment that is needed, but and then the RSF has the infrastructure kind of in their hands. So I mean, because when you look at the map, I mean, I guess what I'm saying, Sheikh, is that do you think from what you're seeing happening on the ground that a planned border may be already in place? Or you're not seeing that, or is that what it's going towards?
I agree with what you're saying, that there's a plan to split the country. And it's following similar steps to how South Sudan was separated before. South Sudan became independent in 2011. But broadly speaking, the steps were for a rebel force, an armed group, an armed militia, to rise up against the government, the central government, to use legitimate grievances. This is important. Legitimate grievances in a particular region to recruit more people to join them against the central government, in order to be able to last in a conflict, whether it's guerrilla warfare or it's open battle against the Sudanese armed forces. They needed foreign backing. So they get foreign backing, they get money, they get arms, they get spy equipment, they get so on and so forth. A lot of support from foreign countries. Those foreign countries obviously start directing them in terms of what they want them to do. The war between this rebel group and the Sudanese armed forces usually would take place in the home region of that rebel group. And a lot of civilians will die, a lot of livelihoods will be destroyed, and more people will be converted to the struggle against the central government, which is using a very heavy hand against them. Now the people in that region are ready to be separated from Sudan. And before there was no reason, there was no notion, there's no separate national identity. Why would you separate from Sudan? But now there's at least a reason. There's a very oppressive and violent regime that's done this to you. And then what happens is you now need to convince the rest of the country to accept this. You have to prepare the public opinion. So then this small rebel group would launch some sort of attack that will hurt at the center of the country, and that will be used in the media by the central government as well, because they're part of this whole plan of conspiracy to convince the people that we just can't coexist anymore. Look, they've attacked the capital city. They violated people over here, and that's because they just hate us and they can't live with us, and so on and so forth. And now you prepared the public opinion on both sides in that region, which you're trying to split, and then the rest of the country, that there's no turning back now. In Arabic, we call them khutut dam. They're like bloodlines. I don't know if that's a phrase in English as well. Like you're using blood to draw the border between people. It's irrevocable. People will never live together again if there's blood between them. Blood has been spilled between them, and then you just need to organize some sort of mediation. Usually it's the USA. I mean, that's what the USA did in South Sudan, and have them both sides come, and through negotiations, very grueling negotiations. It's all just a circus for the media. They eventually come to the very difficult decision that we just have to separate the country, and then it happens. So those are the steps that South Sudan followed. It took a very long time in South Sudan for that to occur, and it was a very, compared to what's happening now, a very minuscule attack on the capital city back in 2005, I think. But what's happening now is kind of similar. So now Darfur, the South, the legitimate grievances the South had were neglect. The central government neglected them a lot. They tried to, the rebel movement, and obviously the foreign backers, mainly the USA, but also Britain, Zionists as well, Ethiopia and others, to convince them that it's because you're different. Because you're different, you're being discriminated against. Majority of people in the South are not Muslim. It's almost equal between Muslims and Christians, but there's a large number of mushrikeen. Each tribe has its god or its religion. So it's majority non-Muslims, because they treat you because you're different, and because you're ethnically different. Because majority of the South do not come from tribes that trace their lineage back to Arab tribes. So they used that to try and create a new national identity, but it didn't work until there was war and the Sudanese armed forces had killed people in the south and so on and so forth. Now this is happening now in Darfur. Darfur is in the west. Almost everyone in Darfur is Muslim. I think the only non-Muslims in Darfur are Murtad, probably. I don't think there's any other religion other than Islam in Darfur. It has very long history in Islamic history. Darfur goes way back. The Sultan of Darfur used to make the kiswah for the Kaaba at one point as well. The difference being is that it's a mix. It's Muslim, but it's a very ethno-diverse mix. Arab tribes, non-Arab tribes, and even amongst them, they're a mix. So a bunch of rebel movements started in 2003. Some with the backing of America, some with the backing of Britain and France. And it's the same steps since then, more or less. What the central government did back then, the Bashir regime, the one that was taken out in the revolution, is they set up this RSF, the Janjaweed, this paramilitary group,
Yeah.
to deal with the rebels. Yeah,
But
over in Darfur.
Janjaweed, yeah, okay, that was Bashir, right? Before he's the one who sets up this so-called Janjaweed that were fighting in the south. And Janjaweed
in
were
Darfur.
supposed from the Arab tribes.
Yeah, so the Janjaweed are from the north of Darfur, from the nomad Arab tribes. Yeah, there is a gut.
And the Janjaweed,
specifically.
what does that mean, Sheikh? Janjaweed, is it what is exactly? Is it the definition for that?
Oh no, it was the name of the militia. It was the name the militia used at that time. But when Bashir wanted to, and they were doing like border control, and fighting the rebels. And then when Bashir tried to make them official as an arm of the state, he renamed them to the Rapid Support Force, the RSF. The Janjaweed, the RSF, they've been doing what people are starting to see now on social media of what the RSF do. They've been doing that in Darfur since 2003, at least anyway. But Darfur, a lot of areas in Darfur are remote, and the literacy rates are lower, and access to journalists was restricted as well. So it wasn't as known as it is today. Because now they're attacking places where most people have phones, most people have access to the internet, and that's how you can see what they do. But the same behavior they do now outside Darfur, they've been doing that in Darfur for years now, and it's been mainly attacking non-Arab tribes, because putting aside the official reason for creating the RSF, which is to deal with the rebel tribes, the rebel militias, they use it as a cover to deal with some of the old rivalries, tribal rivalries in the region. In effect, ethnic cleansing. They've burnt down villages. They've massacred entire neighborhoods. They've forced people off their land.
I mean, even they're even raping women. I mean, this is. I mean, I heard so many times. I was, I didn't believe that this is possible by Muslims. But I mean, how is it?
Well, they film themselves doing it.
No way.
Yeah, these allegations don't come out of nowhere.
They're filming themselves raping women?
They're not allegations. I mean, they're not allegations. Yes, they have. Yeah.
Hasbunallah ni'mal wakil. Hasbunallah ni'mal wakil. Let me, Sheikh, I'm gonna. Okay, so I'm sure you know what's going on in Pakistan, and there's a connection to what I'm going to ask you here. In Pakistan, the situation with Balochistan, for instance, where a huge area that, I mean, obviously it's part of Pakistan, it is Pakistan, but the women in Pakistan, the women in Balochistan, they did a protest in Islamabad, in capital, the other day, and the army came out, army or the police just came in and just humiliated the woman, the way they treated the woman, the way they were beaten, the way they were taken into prison, the way they were, and the women were just coming out and basically complaining to the government that, look, these are the things that are happening. Our men are being taken. Many of them, they have no idea where they are. Many of them have just basically disappeared and things like that. And so yesterday, a journalist was talking, and he said, Pakistan did whatever, the foolish decisions that Pakistan made is what basically created Bangladesh. And now there may be a split that might happen in Pakistan. And you see the same thing happening in Sudan, where the policies of the country is forcing the people to say, we rather not live with you. And, to the point that as if the government is kind of telling the people by humiliating them, by making their men disappear, by sending armies and things like this against their own people. And the people are as if almost saying, yeah, man, let's get rid of this problem rather than keeping the country united. Are you seeing the same things in Sudan, where by design, they're forcing, like when you were saying that they're almost forcing the people to say, you know, you have blood on your hands, we can't live with you. By doing and acting and making things happen where the country splits, whether if it wants to split or not.
Yes, absolutely, and this goes back to very old colonial policy of divide and rule. And there was an initial wave of breaking up and splitting up the Muslim countries, Muslim world, into smaller, weaker, manageable states. The initial wave by the British and the French and so on, the old colonial powers. And see, times have changed, times have moved on since then. A lot of Muslim countries have developed during that period, and that's put them now on the list for further destruction, and to make them smaller again. Yeah, so and it's not hidden. I don't think it's hidden. It's an open secret, maybe, that the US has touted the idea of breaking Pakistan into 4 different states: Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, and the north, or maybe handing the north to Afghanistan or something along those lines. And it's even less hidden because they've spoken about it actually, and they've attended meetings to split Sudan into 5 countries. And this specifically, that's come up many times on the tongues of American diplomats in meetings where the American diplomats were present, but the speakers were Sudanese. Because they have people that collaborate with them in Sudan and other places. They have collaborators, they have agents, they have people who would draw the server foreign power for whatever interests they perceive, and they are the tools which lead to the suffering of everyone. So the head of the RSF, Hemeti, the head of the Sudanese armed forces as well, Burhan, they are both collaborators with America, firstly, before anyone else. And the worst thing, what's worse than this is how one thing is to sell yourself to the Western traditional imperialist powers who run the world anyway and they're very powerful. Another thing is to now sell yourself to regional powers who are also themselves client states as well in Sudan. And Sudan is so bad that they even have loyalties to Saudi Arabia or to the UAE, and they try to find allies in Egypt. And the standards are so low amongst the political and military class in Sudan that they everyone has a price, and everyone's open to sell for whoever is willing to.
Who is the
pay for their
political
services.
class in Sudan, Sheikh? I mean, if you were to, Wani, what do they look like? Where do they live? I don't know, or at least I don't believe they live in Sudan. I mean, they're probably, So who consists of the political class in Sudan?
So the political class in Sudan can be divided, broadly speaking, into the original political parties that were set up during the British Empire's rule. So Britain oversaw the establishment of a parliament in Sudan and the establishment of the first 2 political parties in Sudan, and had them do a few elections, referenda, practice democracy, and then they granted independence to Sudan afterwards, keeping some military bases there and certain promises that certain interests are not touched. And from those original political parties, there have been some splintering, some disagreements, new parties have formed. And later on, during the Cold War, socialist-based political parties started to appear in Sudan. So now this is, broadly speaking, one collective, which are the secular groups, secular political parties, those who were originally set up by the British government and their offshoots, and the socialists and their offshoots, because they also have their own splinters, communists and Baathists and so on and so forth. They're not all exactly on the same page. So that's, generally speaking, one grouping. Another grouping is Islamic political parties and Islamic movements. So this is like the National Congress, like the Islamic movement, Harka Islamiyya, Al-Jabha, the Islamic Front, the Muslim Brotherhood, and so on and so forth. And that's another broad group as well. And then you have the army. Sudan is run by the army. The military, the top military brass are basically political as well. They're not just soldiers. They're not just career army men. They're involved in the politics as well. So, generally speaking, is these three groupings in Sudan: it's the secular, the Islamic, and the army. And the army's taken different sides historically. At one point, they were aligned to the secularists, more so the socialists. And most recently with Omar al-Bashir, they were aligned to the Islamic movements. They collaborated, not all the Islamic movements, but a large chunk of them collaborated, worked together in the coup of 1989 that brought Omar al-Bashir to power. After which he put some of them in prison because he's dealing with his immediate rivals to try and hold power just for himself. But a number of them did stick with him, and he brought in some Sharia rules during his tenure in power. And because of that, when the revolution occurred in 2019, people started to associate his regime and his regime's failures and his regime's oppression with Islam, because he kept bringing Islamic slogans. He brought some Islamic rules. There was visibly Islamic movements which were allied with him that kept defending him even to the last day, which gave an opportunity for the old secular parties to come back to power again. But what's important to understand is the method, the model of politics in Sudan is still stuck in the colonial era, which is you need to have a foreign backer. Doesn't matter who you are, military, Islamic, secular. If you're part of the system and you play the game, you have to have some friends in higher places, and those friends in higher places are the embassies. So there's collaborators all over the place. There's amongst the Islamic movements, amongst the secular parties, and within the army. People are aligned to America. People are aligned to Britain. People are aligned to France. People are aligned, like I said, now the standards are so low to the UAE, to Saudi Arabia, and some they think they're clever. They try to put the eggs in more than one basket, and they try to do some for him, some for them, and try to be clever between them, and sometimes bring the American proposals in meetings and negotiations, and other times speak against it or raise concerns about it because he's trying to. So there's a lot of games, there's a lot of politicking in Sudan, and it's all based on this really. Basically, Britain taught them how to do politics, and they've stuck with it.
So, Sheikh, I mean, if you look at let's say first thing, I mean, when the United States talks to the parties in Sudan, I mean, do they meet somewhere else, or are they meeting in Khartoum? Where do they meet to discuss when they want to? It seems like right now it's on back burner for now.
Yeah. Okay. So right now, as we say in Arabic, لا صوت يعلو فوق صوت المعركة. There's no voice, no sound louder than that of the battlefield. Everyone who doesn't have a gun is irrelevant at the moment. You can only, the only way to do anything is to influence those with the guns. So it's the Sudanese Armed Forces and the RSF are the only political actors at the moment in Sudan. Everyone talks around them. Some people try to influence them. Some people have tried to ally themselves with them as a route back to power again. But it's really just down to these two, honestly. Now these two, they are invited to come to the Jeddah platform, I guess that's what they call it, which is a joint US-Saudi initiative of mediation, and they've also invited the African Union, the United Nations, and IGAD. IGAD is like an economic development organization for like the East African countries, so Kenya, Sudan, Ethiopia, these countries.
Yeah. I did hear that they called them to Kenya. And there was some type of a negotiation taking place in Kenya, but it didn't work.
But to be honest, the role they play, AU, IGAD, even the UN, is more just bringing people on the table. That's it. But in terms of actual ideas and direction, it's coming really from the USA, more or less. And
Sheikh,
to a lesser lesser
what
extent the UK as well.
the role of United UAE? I've heard that there's a lot of gold that is being transferred there. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of gold companies in general that are doing a lot of business with UAE. And is that business
Mm.
as general, and or they're funding the genocide? Obviously, they're probably taking one side or the other.
Yes.
So they are funding the
Yep.
genocide.
So 100%. So there's two layers to what's happening. The most important country, so we don't get lost, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of countries involved in
Yes.
Sudan.
Yes.
Um, um, yeah, even Norway is involved in Sudan. Yeah, that's how much of a colony Sudan really is. It's living in the past. The major players really are US, UK, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. These are the main players. In terms of influencing the behavior of the political and military class. So the army, the RSF, and even those secular parties. The main directors are these four countries. There's two layers. One is financial, military, physical, the material layer,
Mm.
and the other one is political, more ideas based, more of what should the new Sudan look like. And the USA is dominating the political layer. Nobody has any original ideas. It's all come from some American diplomat, whether it's from the Secretary of State, whether it's from the new ambassador there, the US embassy itself, which is the biggest in Africa. It's probably a military base, really, pretending to be an embassy. And
And this is in Sudan,
or some in Sudan,
largest.
the US embassy.
I thought it was
Khartoum,
more of.
yeah.
Oh wow! I was thinking it was Kenya. They might have had the largest.
I think before, this is a new embassy they built a few years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
It's just it's more it's almost definitely a military base, for intelligence operations, and with a small office for the ambassador and the diplomats. It's like the one in Baghdad, like the one they have in Iraq. It's basically a military base. It's a fortress. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, was saying. Politically, the USA, to a lesser extent the UK, because when they were having negotiations before this war began, the main inputs in terms of debating what the new Sudanese state should look like is coming from these two countries, mainly, more so the USA. The other layer, the material layer, is the financial and the military support. For this plan to work, the RSF need to be able to stand up to the Sudanese army. The Sudanese army also need to give like a head start, make things easy for the RSF, because on paper they don't match up at all. So the UAE has bolstered the RSF greatly, financially, militarily. They've given them new hardware they'd never had, things they wouldn't dream of. They've got drones now. They would never have dreamed of having something like that before. They even got spy equipment from the Israelis. So they've got a huge upgrade in terms of like in their arsenal. While at the same time, the head of the armed forces keeps ordering his troops to withdraw from military bases. In the beginning, he used to say tactical reasons, but it's happened so many times, it's really questionable. These can't all be tactical withdrawals, because now you just opened up towns for the RSF to take over. So it's understanding that both sides are basically on the political layer are run by America. On the financial layer, the army gets aid from Saudi Arabia. So it looks like the Saudis and the UAE have a proxy war between themselves. But when you look at the political layer, there's only one outcome really to this, and both sides are playing their game. In terms of the leaderships, the people on the ground don't know any better. The common soldier in the armed forces is told this is the rebels backed by the UAE and they're trying to take over the country and we need to defend them. Oh, but we just got an order to retreat to some other location. And the common soldier in the RSF, those from the original tribes and not the new mercenaries they've been hiring, thinks that he is fighting to liberate Sudan from the previous regime and by rights of conquests, he gets ghanima and gets to do whatever he wants when he enters a town. The twisted logic they have, and that's why they can loot and they can rape and do whatever they want.
Sheikh, what would be the effects on surrounding countries? Because do you see this war affecting Egypt or Libya in any way? From at least, see, for instance, the reason is 1958 is when Sudan splits from Egypt. Is this? Am I getting this right here? I mean, well, independence. Let's call it independence. Yeah. Is when Sudan gets independence.
56. Yeah.
Okay.
56.
So it splits already, becomes a country, and then it splits again, and then could split again. So, what is the role of Egypt in this? And even Sahel, because when I was reading, they said that this could go all the way, having effects not only in Egypt but also in the Sahel area, which is Mali and the rest of all the way Ghana, Burkina Faso. All of these areas could be affected. What happens in Mali or in Sudan?
Some of these are exaggerated because it's as bad as it is. It's a control situation from the perspective of the United States and its allies and proxies in the region. It's a control situation. There is geographic, cultural, obviously religious connections between Sudan and all the places you've mentioned. Sudan, as you mentioned, is obviously was part of Egypt even before the British occupation of Egypt. It was part of the Wilaya of Egypt, and there's a natural continuation of the Nile River, obviously going from Sudan north to Egypt, and the Sahel region extends towards through Chad, Niger, Mali. Darfur is part of that region as well, so it's inside Sudan. The main connection, really, I'd say there's two. One is in terms of the countries surrounding Sudan taking in refugees, like Chad, South Sudan, Egypt, Ethiopia, so on and so forth. Because millions of people are displaced in Sudan. The capital city has been depopulated to the point where it's almost like a ghost town now. And my family, majority of my family, extended family, were in Khartoum State. Khartoum State is made up of three cities: Khartoum, Omdurman, and Bahri. We're from Bahri, but I got extended family in Omdurman and Khartoum. No one's left there, nobody. And the population's dropped. I don't know if anyone's got any accurate numbers, but if assuming the city was around 9 million before, the state was at 9 million before, it's below 2 million now. And there's people displaced in Sudan, other towns, and a lot more outside of Sudan, mainly in Chad, Egypt, and South Sudan. The RSF, this is the second point. The second connection is that the RSF, they these borders are obviously placed there by Britain and France before. They're not natural. A lot of the tribes in Darfur, they live on both sides of the border, in Sudan and Chad. So a lot of the RSF do many times bring in extra reinforcements from Chad, which is technically the Sahel region. But they've also, with the money they got from selling gold mainly to the UAE, and they previously got money from the European Union. The European Union used to pay the RSF for stopping African migrants from getting to Libya through Sudan. That they've hired a lot of mercenaries further down the Sahel, from Niger, from Mali, and these areas. So there's a connection there, but there's nothing spilling into these countries at the moment, and there doesn't seem to be a plan. Maybe in the future, if Darfur becomes a separate state, then there may be friction between Chad and Darfur, especially on the ethnic lines, because if Darfur is given to the RSF, which is a supremacist militia for Arab ethnicity and tribes, while Chad is ruled by I think Zaghawa, as in one of the stronger tribes there, and the Zaghawa are like rivals to the RSF in Darfur. There may be something there, some friction between the new state of Darfur and Chad in the future. But as things stand right now, this is contained within Sudan.
So, subhanallah. Sheikh, let me ask you this. Now, with the United States, here's the thing. You have Ukraine situation going on, which is obviously still hot. You have situation with what's happening in Gaza. Now you have this also situation with Sudan. Is United States, do you think, is able to actually control, that have actual say obviously it has say what's happening in the region, but how long can this be sustained, Sheikh? I mean, in the area, is it possible to continue on this type of just continuous war, splitting countries and war? Is this possible even for United States to be able to control the region?
I think so long as they have collaborators, so long as they have proxies, so long as they have clients, so long as they have agents, they can. And if you think about it this way, this is a lot cheaper than going into Iraq and trying to split it into 3 countries while physically occupying it. And they didn't manage to do that. They managed to split it administratively, but they didn't manage to actually break it into 3 different countries, Iraq, the USA, and it was very expensive. But here, the money's coming from the UAE, the money's coming from Saudi Arabia. They're willing collaborators, so it can delegate some of this work to its regional. I don't want to call them allies. They don't deserve to be called allies. They're not on the same level as the USA. They're higher above, like the Sudanese armed forces and the RSF, but they're below the USA. So they'll be like, I don't know, client states of the USA. Or those the leadership of the the SAF, and RSF, they are basically proxies. So long as they have people willing to work with them, I think they can. This is a very cheap route, and the UAE, they really don't care about their reputation. I don't think they really matters to them what other people think about them. They got blood in their hands in Yemen. They got blood in their hands in Libya, in Sudan as well. They were so eager to normalize relations. They got the blood of the Palestinians on their hands. It's a very economic, efficient way for the USA to run the world.
Sheikh, what is the strategic nature of Sudan? I mean, why, the foreign powers or even colonial infrastructure that is being created or constantly recreated, what is, I guess, the regional nature of Sudan that makes it so, that so many powers are looking into this area to constantly split it apart?
The biggest danger to them is Islam, if I'm to speak very frankly. But there are, geographically, strategically, it is very valuable. It was the largest country in Africa by area before the South was split.
Yeah, that's true.
Population
it's the largest country.
But the population,
subhanallah, I didn't even think about that.
But its population obviously is very small compared to the landmass. So there's a lot of areas which are really untouched and a lot of potential because in terms of what is known and what has come out of beneath the earth in Sudan, oil, gold, a lot of gold, other minerals, other deposits. So it's a good assumption to expect there to be more, but it's untouched. So there's a lot of potential there, and this is why a lot of countries are interested in Sudan, just purely from an economic perspective, like Russia, for example, and China. They're involved less politically, more economically. They even for the regional powers like the UAE, because the UAE gets a lot of gold from Sudan, and they'd like to have control of the ports, the Emirati, the Abu Dhabi conglomerate. I forget its name now, but it has a number of ports in the region, seaports. So a Red Sea port in Sudan will also be adding to the little empire there. The Nile River Valley is very fertile.
Mm.
And
Actually, it
the
goes
Nile
through
River
Sudan.
itself is both Niles, the Blue Nile
Right.
and the White Nile. They combine at where Khartoum is, and then they form the Great Nile that carries on into Egypt. And Sudan has more rivers. It has other rivers as well. Egypt may only have the one, very large one, but Sudan has a lot more rivers than that. The area, I think, I'm not sure this is correct or not, but I think the area of like arable land is even bigger than Ukraine. Ukraine is obviously a very major producer
It's for
of
so
wheat.
agriculture. I mean, because I know it's
Yes,
known as a breadbasket for the Muslim world. I mean, at one point, Sudan was known for this, and now you have.
yeah.
Oh wow! So does that
And
still take place, Sheikh? I mean, and as far as rice and other things going to Egypt and going to other places, what kind of trade does Sudan do with the rest of the other than gold, which is sufficient enough? But
right now, I mean, even gold. Sudan is a fail state. It's collapsed. It's a collapse state. There is nothing really happening. Its GDP was shrinking at a point in time. Not the GDP rate. The GDP, the actual total production of Sudan was actually dropping, in the years just before and during the revolution. It's completely mismanaged. It was the previous regime completely ran the country to the ground, like the previous regimes did. So it hasn't met its potential. It's been kept in a situation of instability. And the problem is all these self-centered individuals in the political class, whether military or otherwise, is they only see their immediate benefit, their immediate take a few cuts here, raise some taxes here. Even if it in the long term destroys the country, they've ruined so many private businesses on the taxation and other rules and regulations they have, just to make a quick buck, basically. And then they spend it abroad and invest in some properties outside Malaysia, maybe Singapore, UK, in the Gulf, and that's it. That's all that really matters to them. So it's really similar. That's how the political class behaved in Sudan during the British Empire's days, because the political class was English, was British, and they didn't care what the future of the country. They just made sure that the railways were working, the bridges were working, the factories were working. That's it. Everyone else doesn't matter. And that's how they behave. They behave in the same way. So long as my income streams are fine, nothing else matters. And the ones that guarantee these income streams for me are the foreigner, the one my partners. So it's I mean, this is just the latest episode in terms of the struggles of Sudan. But going back to the original question, it is very valuable in terms of the potential it has, its location on the Red Sea, now the Nile Valley, the Sahel region obviously extends to it. But the most important thing really is Islam. There was like a boom in the population in the last century in Sudan, and it grew very Islamic, which poses a threat, which is you don't want a very largest country in Africa if it becomes independent.
It grew very Islamic. What does that mean? I mean, there's
Sudan's population has
Muslim,
historically been. So the Sudan's population, the area which we know Sudan, historically has been very small compared to its surroundings. Maybe Allahu Alam, due to migration, due to maybe technology, I don't know, air conditioners, whatnot, it's become easier to live in. So the medicine and so on and so forth. So there was a population boom in Sudan, but from its original roots, from its Islamic roots, it stayed that way. So it's expanded, and Islam runs deep across Sudan. So the threat of an independent Islamic state does exist in Sudan. It has existed in Sudan. It's one of the few places that actually evicted the British Empire militarily, like rebelled and kicked the British out. They came back again, obviously, but the whole movement, the whole resistance was Islamic resistance against the British.
What was the resistance?
So there is that threat.
What the resistance was a particular movement. Every region.
So it was led by a man who claimed to be the Mahdi. But basically, he led the Sufi tariqas in Sudan in rebellion against the British, and then his great grandkids became. They founded one of those two political parties under the supervision of the British.
I didn't think the Sufis got involved in politics, bro. But okay, I guess they did. Sheikh, so I'm going to talk about Islam a little bit, but before I go there, what I was hearing is that the parties that one of the reasons for this crisis is that Sudan, during the latest revolution, I guess that was 2003. When did the revolution begin? In 2019? I think, yeah, okay.
2019, yeah.
Okay, so 2019.
No, December 2018, yeah.
2018, 2019. One of the reasons for it that it seems when the revolts began, or revolution began, there was all this. Obviously, U.S. was worried about what could happen potentially, like you were talking about Islam coming back, or just in general a revival. Then this thing starts, or at least seems like they've kind of used this crisis to crush those political parties. But I have heard that there is the political parties that were being used, or that were at least calling for revolution, have formed some type of independent governments within the region. Is this true, that they are now building clinics, building different things, and kind of running certain affairs? Have you heard of this? And the reason I'm asking you this, because I'm thinking maybe
parties? The political parties?
Meaning the groups that were involved in the revolts, in the revolution. Many of them were young activists and things like that.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So I have heard that many of them are now, helping the public, helping the populations in whatever way they can, and in some ways actually have become some type of a government running. And the reason I'm asking you this is saying that is the United States in touch with those people also?
So the biggest enemy to the US and its allies is the Sudanese people. They are the target, actually, of what's happening, because the people revolted, came out in revolution in an uprising against the Bashir regime, and the Bashir regime had like an on and off love-hate relationship with the USA. But it was definitely aligned to the USA, because when it came to the big matters, they always did what the America told them to do. Splitting Eritrea from Ethiopia, that was Bashir's regime. Splitting South Sudan from Sudan, that was Bashir's regime. Implementing IMF policies, that was Bashir's regime. And even involvement in other things in the region, but it just suffices as some examples. The revolution came from the ground up, and the socialist parties formed something called the Sudanese Professional Association before the revolution. It wasn't, but they used that as a front to try and organize the protesters, because the protesters were up against the ostensibly Islamic military dictatorship. And even though Bashir himself, he has a famous statement where he said, the Sharia we implemented was it's diluted Sharia. So even he's like, by his own admission, it wasn't really full Sharia kind of thing. But mixing Sharia with un-Islamic systems is not gonna work, obviously, and it's gonna be oppression. The SPA managed to organize protests because it seemed neutral. It's just a professional association. That's all it is. It wasn't pro-regime. It didn't seem like it belonged to those other political parties who used to rule before Bashir came to power, and they had run the economy down before, and they're known to be, in bed with foreigners and and dominated by self-interest politics and so on and so forth. So because it seemed like a neutral entity, they managed to organize these protests and win the trust of the people. When it came to obviously, because you can't take power from the army just by being activists. Who's going to run the country afterwards? There have to be some people who are organized politically, have an idea, or some people who can run the government. So those political parties, who were basically more or less behind the SPA, they came to the fore after the revolution, towards the end of like when the revolution was coming to its climax, and the SPA now that it has the support of the streets declared it was backing those parties. Just the acronym FFC, Forces of Freedom and Change, because it was a coalition of these parties. Now the FFC, they ended up selling the people on the ground because their ticket back to power was riding on the wave of these protests, which the army was buckling under. There were lots of attempted coups against Bashir during the revolution period by soldiers and officers who had enough of him ordering them to go and shoot people and so on and so forth. So then the army, on the US direction, to contain the situation, they deposed Bashir and put someone else in power from their own people to try and control the situation. But obviously they're still under pressure from the streets. So then, rather than lose all power, they said we'll bring in these civilian political parties into the government, and we'll have a transitional period. And later on, they can rule the country by themselves. At least that will calm people down. So the FFC, they agreed to that, basically leaving the streets behind them. They use the people as a stepping stone to get into a power sharing agreement with the army, and they did. And from then on, the army later on did the coup against them anyway. Then they started another round of negotiations, and they came back to a hybrid government. Except that agreement got cancelled because this war happened. It's basically it's like a summary of that. Now the FFC, there's four main parts to it. Those political parties, which I was talking about, they're the leading element, and they're the people who try and take power again. And they have foreign backers. Second part is the SPA, who were like running the protests on the ground. Third part are the rebel militias who rebelled against the Sudanese government before, like in Darfur and in the south and other areas. The fourth part is something known as Lijal al-Muqawama. I don't know the English name for it, but it translates to resistance committees. That's what it translates to. And this sounds like this is what you're describing. So these are local neighborhood volunteers who've organized themselves to carry out, I feel like, community services in the absence, obviously, of the central government. And some of them were dominated by socialists who had set them up. Others were not. Others were more natural. But as time went on, during when the FFC basically threw the people behind them and joined the government, and then during this war, what's left of these are more or less independent, and they do run some of these services where they can. Obviously, since the wars began, that's been ruined. The USA did try to establish contacts, and they had established contacts with some of these young activists. Not just the USA, Britain did, the Germans did, other European countries did as well. And if you try to imagine this happening in the USA instead, to see how absurd this situation is. Imagine, these insurrectionists, Trump supporters who refused to accept the last election result, who stormed the Capitol. Imagine that when that demonstration was going on, the ambassadors of Sudan and other countries joined those demonstrators. They spoke to them. They gave them words of encouragement. And said, "Yes, we support your what's the word? Your hopes and your dreams to transform your country into a new, better future." Whatever phrases they use, and they join in the protest. They give platforms to their own platforms to these insurrectionists. They try to find allies from amongst them, some people they can work with in the future. And on top of that, some of these embassies, they secure route of funding and arms. Not that you guys need guns in America, but arms for the protesters to attack the government. That's basically what's happening in Sudan. All these foreign embassies have been doing that. That's absurd. That's not how embassies are supposed to behave. But this is just further proof. Sudan is a colony. Well, it's just a colony, and these are all foreign powers competing with it, and they don't respect the Sudanese state at all. They don't have state to state relations. From embassy to foreign office. It's not that. They think they can just talk to whoever they want and find allies wherever they want. The US diplomats, they go around to remote areas and have meetings with tribal leaders. They even meet imams of Sufi tariqas. None of this is relevant, should be relevant to the diplomatic relationship between the Republic of Sudan and the United States of America. But it's not about that. It's about them trying to find as many people who they can influence on the ground in order to themselves shape the future of the country into what their vision is, which is at the moment to split Sudan into smaller, manageable, weaker states.
So, Sheikh, now let's talk about the final stage, meaning the revolution, the solution here. Obviously, the population is Muslim. At least, large population of Sudan is Muslim.
More than 90%. Yeah.
More than 90% are Muslims. They all speak. All of them, they speak in Arabic language. But just to clarify this, when in Darfur areas, when people claim, so and so parties or so and so side is Arab and things like that, what do they mean by that? Because you're saying everybody speaks Arabic.
Yeah, for a lot of people in Sudan, Arabic is the second language, but everyone speaks Arabic. When people talk about Arab, they mean the lineage. The tribal lineage goes back to Arab tribes, as opposed to Zaghawa,For, or Denka, or others. Denka, obviously, in the south, which are like the non-Arab tribes. I don't want to use the phrase indigenous because you can't really be sure. Some indigenous regions, some maybe themselves also migrated into some, but as in they're not from Arab roots. That's what it means. But everyone speaks Arabic. Arabic is lingua franca. They have many different dialects in Sudan. That's basically it. Ethnic chauvinism, racism, nationalism, tribalism. These are all tools, obviously more or less the same thing, but they were used by the previous regime and before them the British to divide and rule. I mentioned before, Bashir set up the RSF specifically from Arab tribes in order to fight rebels who were majority of them were from Zaghawa tribes, and he used that to just dividing the population therefore so that he can stay in power, and he used that in other areas as well, which is why sometimes this ugly head of racism appears across Sudanese society. I don't know if you've seen this. You probably have it in America, where there's like racism by blacks on other blacks because they're
black on black. Well, we have black on black crime and all kinds of stuff that goes on. Yeah,
not specifically crime, but as in racism. Sure, but most people in Sudan are black anyway. The name of the country, Sudan, means land of the blacks. But based on your tribe, your ethnicity, your race, your race genealogy, there's different shades, obviously. And Sudan's a very big country, so there is such a thing of people being racist to people who they perceive as you're blacker than me, kind of thing. And there's racism towards people who are white as well, or fair skinned or Arab, like myself.
But you're considered half Sudanese. Let me just make sure.
I'm half Sudanese, yeah. So because my mother's Sudanese.
Right.
Mother Sudanese. No, because it comes up as that. I don't know if I mean, this is the narrow-mindedness of nationalism and
that's why I'm laughing.
You've seen this before. You've seen this. Yeah, you've definitely seen this before. You comment on another country, and so say, well, what right do you have to speak about it? But this is my country. You speak about your own country. Don't talk about us. Yeah, right. That's the narrow-mindedness. So I get that sometimes, which is what you look Egyptian or Syrian. You can't talk about our country. So I have to say, no, but I'm half Sudanese. This is why I look like that. But there are Sudanese, full Sudanese, who do look like me. Because going back to pre-British times, this is one ummah, it was one state. Sudan was part of the Wilaya of Egypt itself. and you don't need a visa to travel from as north as Turkey or Bulgaria or Romania down south to Sudan. There's families who like established from Greece in Sudan. The Greeks in origin, and they're established in Sudan for generations now. There's people from Nigeria, the Hausa, in Sudan.
Oh yeah,
there's people from Morocco in Sudan.
So you have the two main tribes in Africa. So you have the Hausa and what's the other one?
Africa is a very big place around.
Yeah, there's like anytime you talk to brothers from Mali, for instance, or Nigeria, they're very Hausa seems to be very common tribe. So
Hausa, Yoruba,
Fulani, there's Yoruba. Okay, yeah. Fulani. So are these tribes across? They're all across Africa. Fulanis and Yoruba and Hausa and.
Sudan's placing makes it taking a lot of people because it's on the Hajj route.
I see.
So a lot of people pass through Sudan, have been passing through Sudan, and have stayed in Sudan as well. So it's part of the reason why there's a lot of diversity in Sudan. But the Muslim world is diverse by definition.
That one. Yeah.
Anyway.
Wow.
Because we don't believe in this. No, white man is not better than a black man, or vice versa, and no Arab is better than a non-Arab, or vice versa. These are hadith. Muhammad sallallahu and yes, it's in the Quran. So the solution is Islam itself. If you adhere to Islam, these problems go away. But to be practical, people can adhere in their personal lives. But if the authority is in the hands of neo-colonial powers, and they have more influence and more power and authority, and they mess about with the education system, they mess about with the media, they have proxies on the ground who stoke nationalistic divisions, and they have imams who work for them, who will say whatever, and they will whatever they want, and they will twist out in a hadith to justify things. There are lots of these people in the RSF think what they're doing is halal. They genuinely think that what they're doing is halal. And it's fine for them to ethnically cleanse Masali to other non-Arabs in Darfur, and to commit loot and rape and all of these kind of things. So until we get rid of this foreign interference, and we have an independent authority, we can't fix these problems. But the solution to fixing these problems is in Islam itself. It is in Islam itself. All of these problems we have tribal rivalries over land, and pastures. It's like infamous in a place like Darfur, Kurdistan, where there's competition over land between the farmers and the nomads. So there's tribes which are nomads, and they're moving throughout the year with their cattle, from north to south, for example. And you have farmers who are settled, and that's their land and their farming. And then these nomads come in, and the animals start eating some of their stuff. And this friction exists. These frictions are not new. These frictions are centuries old. But Islam has rules on land already that solved these a long time ago. But the state allows the British allowed these problems to ferment and foster, because divide and rule, let them focus on each other. And Bashir's government was very good at doing that as well. Just let these problems carry on between people. Don't really solve them. You have land disputes between different tribes. So then Bashir's solution is let the Arabs, just ethnically cleanse, the non-Arabs, as opposed to setting the Islamic rules on land. There's land which is public, which no one takes. There's land which is private. Okay, so show me. Have you bought this? No. Have you? Did you inherit it? No. So how did you get ownership of this land? And so there's solutions to this. The solutions even to because this is the other thing that happens within tribes is, okay, something happens between them, and someone dies. So the other tribe comes and takes revenge. How do they take revenge? Against the entire tribe, as opposed to that one guy. But to be honest, had they gone just for the one guy who did the crime, then his tribe would have backed him anyway. And this is going back to like Jahiliyyah days. There's obviously a solution to this. Every individual is responsible for his own actions, and nobody takes justice in the hands. You take it to the Qadi. Yeah, so then the Qadi judges and either the murderer is killed or diya is paid. Alas, the problem is solved. There's nothing left to fight over. You've removed the issue and the friction. But these regimes, they always let these things foster. There's a lot of problems in Sudan, and their solutions are so easy. Like there's no even ijtihad required. It's already been spelt out. But we don't have authority. The authority is always in the hands of the collaborators.
SubhanAllah. So the end of the day. But Sheikh, last question here. The revolutionary parties that existed before this war began, do they have understanding of Islam? Or I mean, what is there public opinion for Islam in the region? Has this war made any changes? I mean, for instance, Gaza situation has, but now the Ummah is questioning a lot more than before of why this is happening. How come 20, 30, 40,000 people can be killed in less than in 2 months? Do you see that happening in Sudan when you are talking to Sudanese brothers over there, that there is now more understanding or awakening of wanting Islam as a political system?
If you want to distract people from thinking about ways to improve the situation and think about different ideas and proposals for a new vision of the state, you don't want them to think about that. You want to distract them. Then you've got entertainment, or you have war. Entertainment, people don't have disposable income like that in Sudan. That's not an option. But there's war. Yeah, similar in Libya and similar in Yemen. You find a situation where you lost control as a foreign power, and the people may independently establish a new government and pick their own leaders. So we can't have that. So this whole movement, we were in a situation basically where it was revolution by the people, including so many different parts of Sudanese society, Islamic movements, some of the secularists as well, people non-aligned, against the regime of Bashir, which is a client regime to foreign power. This was the situation. And then through all this maneuvering, they were able to change the situation to one where it's negotiations and mediation between secular political parties and essentially a secular military institution that was pretending that it still had some remnants of Islam because they didn't want to lose face in front of the people. But they've narrowed down like the scope of political activity between these two. And this is now more controllable because we have direct contact with this kind of people. And now it's gone even narrower than that, because within just the military institution, the political situation now is, how do we get these two to, agree and make up and come to an agreement and stop the fighting? And this way, you've taken the people full circle. Because now, is anything that makes the war stop, will accept. You see? Which is what now? Which is that the two guys from the army agree with each other. Which is what we go back to the army, the military dictatorship again. Which is what people went out against originally, right? So this is the whole maneuver. The enemy is the people who dared to rebel against the American empire. That's, and I don't think a lot of people don't realize that. Like even in Gaza, people don't realize that you didn't stand up to the Zionists, you stood up to America. Yeah? Right. That's why America is throwing all of its power behind too, because if you want something, you go through it. You get it through me. Yeah, we'll give you 2 states, for example. Yeah, but you have to behave. But you try to say no, I will not accept the situation, and we'll stay quiet on 2 states for a while, and we'll let the Israelis do whatever they want, and we'll give them all the weapons. Yeah, so just that you learn never to raise your head again. So it's the same struggle. It's the same struggle in Gaza and Sudan and other places. This is liberation, a struggle for liberation from the American empire, really. So we can get there. In Sudan before the revolution, there was a very conducive environment for dawah political activism. There were different people even coming up with different ijtihads of how an Islamic state should be. And in a normal environment, the best idea wins. Yeah, but in the environment where you have the interference of the foreigners, then they'll do everything they can to divert the society away from that. And one of the biggest ways of doing it is what they're doing right now, because eventually through the suffering of people, you get them to a point where they'll accept anything now. They'll accept the separation of Darfur. They'll accept the army to come back to power, and that means we stay within the the power, or within the influence and the authority of the West, in America specifically. But obviously, it doesn't have to be that way. They plan on other plans. So it is there's the route for the solution is pretty clear, like it is in Gaza, to be honest, which is the Sudanese armed forces. They're not beaten; they are still a serious force to be reckoned with. They have been systematically weakened by Burhan because the Americans just wanted him to do it. But it's still a significant force that even trains other Arab armies. What they need to do is they need to change the leadership. They need to realize by now that, and this is something which other people can put pressure on them and help them to open their eyes, that the guy in the top is a traitor. Do you not see how many times he's told you to withdraw and he just let the RSF do what they want? How many times have the regime officials just run away with their families and they left the people they were supposed to look after to the mercy of the RSF? How many times are you going to see this and let this happen? Is this why you joined the army? To not protect the people. Why do people join the army? To not defend people. Sudanese soldiers are more integrated in society. There's like other Arab countries that try to control, but Sudanese soldiers they're more integrated. And it's easier to influence and act and reach them and influence them. But they have to do that. They have to change the guys on top. They have to secure the country. They have to secure the country so that the people can actually give bay'ah to a Khalifa, an actual independent Islamic ruler, who will then expel the foreign influence, who will then deal with the RSF, because the RSF, you have to be able to, because this is like times of fitna, a lot of things get mixed up together. You have to be able to separate the mercenaries, the hired mercenaries, from the sons of the tribes who live in your country. Some of whom have picked up arms because they were under duress. Some of whom picked up arms because if they didn't, you would have killed them. As in the Sudanese army would have killed them, because they had their own issues in that fort. Some of whom are just plain criminals. Yeah, and you have to be able to. You can't do this. Like almost like the Uthman Ali situation. How can you expect Ali ibn Abi Talib to do anything if he doesn't have the authority to solve the problem? How do you expect him to go and find the killers of Uthman and take them to court? And this requires time. This requires control. This requires security. The army. If you're going to destabilize the country, you can't do anything. So you have to stabilize the country. You have to kick out the foreign influence, and you have to have an independent Islamic authority that actually represents the people. There's no other way. Just like there's no other way for the Palestinians to be rescued, except if someone with a gun steps up and actually stops the other guy who has a gun from firing. They make them withdraw because they don't want to, because now you've got similar level of ability to him, so he'll be more careful. He'll have to at least withdraw or try to find some diplomatic solution at the very least, because there's force of arms now as opposed to an unarmed civilian population.
Subhanallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sheikh, sometimes it's just amazing why our people in power, they can't see this. Every single time this is being repeated, at the end of the day, there is there's a group of people that can take power and they can change the future of this ummah. And but this type of discussions are needed in order to even understand the political situations and the regions in the world, and the kind of the strategic nature of the lands that we live in, and why the world powers are doing everything possible to continuously intervene so that they can stay in power. But Jazakallah khair, Brother Hanif. I mean, it's always Brother Yusuf. It's because this is very detailed. I mean, alhamdulillah, usually you don't find people that can give the kind of detailed nature of the discussion on Sudan, and it's very important also because it's like we are always focused on different issues. Everybody's focusing on Gaza and a whole literally a genocide taking place in Sudan. And so these type of discussions bring or shed light on what's happening on many different fronts of the Muslim Ummah. So brothers and sisters, Jazakallah khair for watching, but I would like to just quote Brother Yusuf here again. He said, liberation is the only way. And it seems that liberation is on the mind of the Muslims, whether it's in Gaza or whether it's in Pakistan, Afghanistan, or it's Sudan. Everywhere we are, the Ummah is tired. It's looking for solutions, and it's struggling. There's a huge struggle taking place across the Muslim world, and it is all against the American empire that is trying tooth and nail to keep its spider web. But as Allah Azza wa Jal says, the house of a spider is the weakest one. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our efforts, and may Allah Azza wa Jal bring ease and victory to both the Muslims of Sudan and the Muslims of Gaza. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل الهمام نحن فينا عمر لا 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 لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل الهمام نحن فينا عمر صبح بدا نور ظهر نجم وشمس وقمر ألقى على الدنيا الدرر هذا عمر هذا عمر كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر كي تستفيد من العبر هذا عمر هذا عمر لا لن تدوم الجراح بل سيأتي الصباح نحن أهل الكفاح نحن فينا عمر